Hi, I'm Judi Friedman, and I'm chairperson of PACE, People's Action for Clean Energy. We're the largest environmental energy organization, all volunteer, nonprofit in the state of Connecticut. We've been around since 1975. We are really a public health organization because we think energy and public health are very closely linked. We have lots of diseases in this state, and what we breathe, what goes on to our food on farmland, is going to affect our health. So I'm very, very excited about the guest that we have today. He's a very unique individual, a charming individual, who's done an amazing, amazing thing. He has taken a house, actually it wasn't the land in Westport where he lives, it was land for sale. And he took a house and retrofitted it to very special standards, and we call this program the No Energy Bill House Program. So Doug, this is Doug MacDonald. Doug, can you tell me, you came and you saw this land, and what was there, and what did you do?
Hi, Judi. So it started with an idea. Out of Germany, there's a man named Dr. Feist.
Dr. Feist, spell that?
F-I-E-S-T.
F-I-E-S-T, right. Yes, out of Germany.
And Dr. Feist figured out that if you do things to buildings and you, for example, insulate them, if you stop there, you'll have so much improvement on the performance of that structure and how much energy it needs. But if you did a number of things together, that combined effort of doing all those things together can actually decrease the energy footprint of that building by 90%.
So you can take a house and you can decrease its energy footprint, its energy demand, by 90%.
By 90%.
Unbelievable. So what does one do?
So it's everything that you do anyways to make a home. Dr. Feist figured out, because he's a nuclear physicist, he figured out, well, if I actually apply a standard to it, and everybody had to go to this specific standard, then you can actually calculate how much energy efficient each one of those things does, and then all 5 of them added together, extrapolate and push you.
Okay, so there are 5 things he considered. So yep. What are they?
The first one is to super insulate.
Super insulate. What does super insulation mean? And he means super, 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 right?
Right. So consider a building, its footprint being the basement, and its walls being, the sides of your body, and the roof being your hat on your head. So you would insulate all of it. If you, for example, left out a key component of insulation, like you did not insulate your building, that would be the equivalent of your going out in the snow, dressed with a ski parka pants,
and no boots.
And no boots. Okay. So the energy use.
So right, I want to know what insulation means. Is this just pink batting, or what is it? What kind of insulation?
So Passive House does not dictate what kind of insulation. Passive House dictates how much insulation. So if you're in an environment like Nova Scotia, that's further north of us, you would actually be required to have more insulation. In Boston is a slightly different latitude and longitude than we are here now, where I am in Connecticut, which is down by New York City. I actually have less heating degree days, and so the amount of insulation changes where your location is.
So I'm still confused about what insulation. Is it the thickness of the walls?
Yes. So when you insulate a structure, the best way to insulate a structure is as you would yourself. So you always want to be able to insulate top to bottom, and you want to be insulating on the outside because it's the easiest way to have insulation. The second thing that he talked about is making a house airtight.
Okay, so first we have insulation, and then you have an airtight house. That scares me. How am I going to breathe in an airtight house?
Well, so I'll talk about breathing in a second, but the first thing you want to do is you want to define where the airtightness layer is. And that needs to be very clear and simple and easy to execute. Okay, so if you have an airtight layer that moves in and out of the envelope of the building, it will never be achieved by the people that are putting the structure together. So you have your insulation, and then preferably you would have your airtightness layer that's right connected to that. When a structure is airtight to the Passive House standard, it means that air will move through the walls so that the walls will breathe, because a Passive House wall is designed for moisture to actually go through the wall structure. You never want to have a wall structure be completely sealed, because then moisture gets trapped. When moisture is trapped and you have air exchanges, then you end up with mold, right? As long as the walls are thick and can breathe, they act much like the Patagonia jackets we wear, where they're very insulating, but then also moisture is wicking away from your body.
Okay, so first I have this insulation that can breathe,
Yep.
and then I have an airtight layer.
You have an airtight layer, and a layer which is actually a membrane where air can move one way, but not the other way, just like it does on your clothing.
Okay, those are two things.
Yes.
Then what?
And then what you do is you make sure that you have no thermal bridging. And the easiest way to understand thermal bridges are if you have a coffee cup, and the coffee cup is warm and there's coffee inside of it, and you put a spoon in there. The spoon will rapidly become a thermal bridge, and heat will transfer right up the spoon. Now the English always, took the hot tea, poured it in on top of the spoon, so that the spoon would act as the valve to make sure that the dishes wouldn't crack. Okay, so in a house, you don't want anything to touch from the inside to the outside. That's a thermal bridge. Most constructions, we have more than bridges. They're actually highways.
Sure.
So a huge thermal bridge in a standard house is your chimney. Your chimney touches the earth. It goes right through the center of a building, and all your heating and cooling is
Okay, so
decreased.
Insulation, airtight
Airtightness.
layer, and no thermal bridges.
No
No
thermal
way
bridges.
for the air to get in or out when you don't want it to.
Right.
Is that right?
That's right. And then
Okay, that's three things.
that's three things. And then what you do is you take the sun's energy, right, and you utilize it. So in the summertime, you track how the sun would move as to the location and as to that specific building, and you would make sure that you got all the sun's energy in the wintertime, but you would actually create little cantilevers so that in the summertime, when the sun was higher, the windows would be shielded from the heat.
Okay, so you want to address the sun, and you want shading because the roof would block the high summer sun, but the sun is low in the winter, and it would let in the low winter sun.
That's
so
right.
we'd get thermal energy from the sun.
That's right.
So that's the fourth thing.
That's the fourth thing, right?
And then the big one comes, right? That I'm thinking of, the energy recovery ventilator, is that
Right. And then what you do is you also have to have very high energy efficient doors and windows.
Sure.
So while you face your building to the sun, you then want to capture the sun's energy. So in Passive House, for the most part, you actually do not ever tint windows or use any types of gases in the panes to decrease the amount of heat energy that's coming in. You want to utilize that heat energy. For the most part, in this area of New England, you would be having larger windows on the south and smaller windows on the north, because the northern exposures, the window would not be improving your performance.
And
it would
I
actually
think,
be
didn't you
decreasing.
say that you have triple pane?
They're triple pane windows.
Are those European windows?
They're from around the world. So for the most part, they're
Triple
Europeans.
pane.
Right.
And what's between each pane? Just
Nothing.
air?
Just air. Right. And there's no thermal bridging in those construction, which is very important. So
Wow.
certain doors and certain windows are actually Passive House certified, much like you have an Energy Star certified appliance.
So if I wanted to get a Passive House certified window, where would I go? What website might I look at?
A simple Google search, and you would find a list of vendors that would, supply those types of windows. They are more expensive than a standard window, but it's well worth it in terms of comfort and what you get out of it at the end of the day.
And no energy bills because you built right.
Right. Right.
Okay.
So then, as you say, the final thing is you have a house that is incredibly well insulated. It's airtight. You're capturing all the sun's heat and energy, and now you want to get fresh air to come inside.
This is amazing. Here's a house, no thermal bridges, airtight, but I'm going to get fresh air.
Right.
How do I get fresh air?
So there's machines that actually have a core to them, and in the core, fresh air comes inside this core. And the core is the equivalent of having about 4 miles of tubes. So fresh air can come into this machine, which is called the HRV or ERV, and as it comes in, it rubs shoulders with the air that's already been in the structure and is leaving. So as they pass each other, they transfer each other's heat and relative humidity. So if it's 4 degrees outside and it's 77 degrees inside, as the air comes into this core, that heat energy is transferred to each other. So then as the air gets dropped into the spaces that you're living in, the machine has pre-warmed that heat, so it comes in as fresh air, but it's the same temperature as the air that's in the room.
And that's called an energy recovery ventilator?
Right.
Wow, it's amazing. Doug is talking about German passive house, and at the PASSIVHAUS, and it's a technology used all over the world, and we're really very, very excited about this technology. What made you want to do this?
I read a simple white page about it, and I read, well, there's a guy who's figured out if you do these simple steps that we already do, we already talk about insulating, we already know that if you have an environment that's airtight, you're going to be more comfortable when you're doing construction. If you do all these things together, you can decrease the heat loads and cooling loads of a structure by 90%. When I read that, I thought, how can you not want to build this?
Right.
So then, of course, I had to move my kids out of New York City, and I bought a structure that's in Connecticut, and I went and I told my wife we're going to leave our beloved Brooklyn, and I'm going to, reconstruct a house, and it's going to be great, and it won't even have any heat source in it.
What did your wife say?
She said, okay.
Nice wife.
Yeah, right.
She believed in you.
Right.
So I think the exciting thing about this house is not only is it a house that uses 90% less energy, that it's a no energy bill house, but that it is also a retrofit.
Right.
You took an existing house or what was left of it, whatever,
Right. Yeah.
and used that footprint. So
That's
you
right.
didn't do new construction. So that is a very environmental thing to do, and I really commend you for that.
Yeah, it was an exciting project because, in the 1930s, there was a famous pianist, and his name was Oscar Levant, and he bought 26 acres in the town that I live in. And he built this compound for Hollywood parties. And I came along just 3 years ago, and I saw part of the compound still remained. It was a concrete structure. It's a square with a square with a square. And it sat high on a hill, and it faced the sun. And I realized if I could just take that and super insulate it, make it airtight, put in good windows, put in an ERV, I could have an incredibly efficient house.
So you'd known about passive house technology, and then you saw this building. Is that right?
I knew about passive house. I told my wife that I wanted to go make one somewhere, and then I happened to stumble upon this structure that lent itself perfectly to passive house.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And I was able to convert it.
So what was your role? Were you a construction guru? Were you the designer? Did you actually work on the house? What was your role?
Everything from start to finish. So found it, figured out the 2 walls and the floor plan from the 1930s that I was going to remove, figured out the insulation material that we could pull in from Belgium, the windows.
Insulation from Belgium.
Right.
Uh-huh.
which was unusual, and certainly to make a passive house, you can use off-the-shelf products. You do not need to use something exotic from a faraway land. This particular house lent itself to a very specific insulation block that came from Belgium, and we were given the opportunity to use it, but it is certainly not something that's necessary for passive house.
So have you actually hammered nails in the house and done the?
I own every tool possible, and I was
this
there.
is really like your baby. I mean, you have 3 children. This is your 4th child.
Yeah, it was morning to night, and to create something of this standard, when you're working on the structure, if somebody comes along and drills a hole in the building that's as big as your finger, you lose your ability to become certified. So passive house, your airtightness has to be down to that level. And it's hard. People don't understand that as soon as you make a hole, a perforation, as soon as something isn't covered with insulation because you wanted to go to lunch faster, then the standard is blown.
So you watched over this very,
you
very
did it
carefully.
And participated and watched over it,
And can you show us a picture of the house, what it looks like? It's a very unique house, and this was similar to what was already there in some ways. So the kitchen that was there was the same as the kitchen you have now.
Exactly. We actually just removed 2 walls in the whole structure. So the original floor plan lent itself perfectly to modern living because this was designed as the international style by one of Frank Lloyd Wright's proteges named Barry Byrne. And good ideas and good spaces in 1930 still work in today's mind.
Wow. And I think that it was a brilliant person who designed it, though, to work so well now.
It really is shocking. The only thing that was missing was a mudroom. So I have the passive house, and then off the back of it, I took black concrete and I built a mudroom for my kids' backpacks.
I think what amazes me, Doug, if I have this right, your house stays at 74 degrees about winter and summer.
That's right.
With controlled humidity, with no energy bill at all.
Zero.
Is that right? Zero.
In fact, the first year that we lived in it, we sent out every 6 minutes data to the Institute, and it showed temperature outside, temperature inside, and it showed relative humidity outside and relative humidity inside.
Wow.
And one of the things that was funny is every day at 4 o'clock, the temperature inside would jump up. And the Institute said, why does it happen every day at 4 o'clock? Your temperature goes up like a degree.
Kids came home.
Kids come home.
That's cute. Right now, you've given us a wonderful opportunity to visually understand what you're doing with a cartoon, which is so well presented. So we're going to be seeing a cartoon, only 90 seconds long, but boy, does it do the job of explaining passive house techniques.
Great.
So thank you so much.
Passive house explained in 90 seconds. Does your house have a heater in the basement or maybe a fireplace? Probably also a central air conditioner or maybe a window unit. Did you ever wonder if it was necessary? In 1991, a physicist in Austria, Dr. Feist, built the first passive house. Here's what he did. 1. Proper insulation. It's just like wearing the right winter jacket. It also doesn't need a heater. 2. No air leakages. There should be no holes, small or large, to let hot air out of the house. 3. No thermal bridges. A thermal bridge is like a road for heating energy in which warmth can travel right through your walls. As a matter of fact, most of our houses have thermal highways in our walls where heat can easily travel to the outside. Plus, the house needs proper windows most of the time with triple pane glass. It needs to be oriented properly so the sun can heat it in the winter and shade is provided in the summer. And it uses an HRV, a device that provides the inside with fresh air without letting the heat out. Add all these things up, and it turns out your house doesn't need a heater or air conditioner. So where does the heat come from? A passive house needs 90% less energy, and that can easily be supplied by your body heat, the sun, your appliances, light bulbs, and even your TV. This saves you a lot of money on your heating bill and helps preserve the environment.
Did we make it in 90 seconds?
You bet we did.
Doug, another thing I think is very interesting is, okay, you're not using any conventional energy to heat your home. Where does the heat come from in your house?
Well, it comes a little bit from the dogs.
Dogs. Okay, you have two dogs.
Two dogs.
Labradoodles, and they panting and running around. They're giving off heat.
3 boys.
3 boys. Oh, that's a lot of heat.
1 wife.
1 wife. A lot of heat.
No boiler. But then you also have to take into consideration that you have cooking,
Yes.
showers. Pretty much everything you do as a human, you're making heat. So passive house in this area, we actually have to work harder at cooling the structure than we do have to work at heating it. But the house gains, thousands of BTUs from the sun. And you take all of those, you add them together, and you have an incredibly comfortable environment. And you have no idea when it's raining or snowing outside. You can only see through the triple pane windows that there's snow moving or rain moving, but you can't even hear it.
So the house is very, very quiet. So if you were in a noisy street or something, you wouldn't hear any outside noise, and it's just incredible. Doug, have you done other things to your house that are environmental, like landscaping, or what other things have you done that maybe are outside the passive house techniques but still are environmental?
Right. So one of the things that I felt strongly about, which is outside of passive house, is I didn't use any chemicals during our construction. Passive house also does not think that one can insulate when using types of insulation that break down in time. So spray insulations are not considered passive house approvable because in time they actually will disintegrate and lose their RU values and their air tightness. So it's not, so we did not have any chemicals inside of the structure, and it is amazing air quality.
Now, when I go there, I bet when we come to see you, we would experience very fresh air, feeling fresh.
It's incredible. There's no smells. I mean, minus, the 2 Labradoodles. It's really quite shocking. You can cook and then there's no smells. The appliances are not burning any carbon at all. So the appliances are not natural gas or propane. Outside the house, we utilized a lot of techniques where we did not require any plants to have fertilizers or need water. So we pulled in grass that comes from Canada that has a root system that goes down about 6 inches.
Oh, the grass has a root system about 6 inches from Canada.
Right.
What does that do? Hold the water?
It holds the water, and
Wow.
since the roots can go down into the earth, it doesn't need the same amount of fertilizer.
Wow, that's wonderful.
And so when it rains at our house, what's quite shocking is all this floppy grass, which is about 5 inches long, grows and then falls over. When it rains, all these frogs end up climbing up onto the structure. What's quite shocking about our house is we live in Connecticut and there's no ticks. I have Labradoodles and dogs, and I have this floppy grass that never gets cut, never gets sprayed with any chemical, and there's no ticks.
It never gets cut? Your grass never is cut?
Never cut it.
It just falls over?
Falls over.
That's great.
But there's no ticks, and there's no mosquitoes.
And you have deer, you said, in your yard,
And we
too.
have deer.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Good for you.
So there's a way to sort of let the dragonflies and everybody else, the positive insects, work out the balance outside too, so that you end up with a very positive outside and inside environment.
Doug, what got you into thinking this way? What is it? What was the spark that initiated such deep interest in the environment and doing such good work?
For me, it's the reverse of it. How can you not want to live in a house that is warm and comfortable? How do you decide to bring known carcinogens into your house and say, kids, this is okay? I mean, how do you decide that the scary aspect of a tick requires you to put a chemical on your yard that's even worse and is known to cause cancer? So I sort of, the question is a reverse for me. How do we decide not to live healthier environments? I mean, every day I make a decision not to drink gasoline from the tank, right? But it's because it smells bad and I know it will be bad for me, but yet we bring carcinogens into our house.
Absolutely.
And we breathe them, and we live and we coexist with them.
Uh-huh. And what about cars? Are you aware of the car issue? Is that a...
Unfortunately, my whole system fails when it comes to cars.
Uh-huh.
So I do not have anything that is carbon-free.
So you have no energy bill for your house. What about electricity? Do you have an electric bill?
I have one bill, and that's an electric bill.
And that runs the energy recovery ventilator and the lights and...
Yeah, but I also would say I'm a very healthy, normal American family. I have a big refrigerator that gets opened and left open by my kids all the time. My children are they do not like to shut out the lights when they leave the room, and we have 3 computers and we have TVs that run sports. With all of that going, we live an incredibly comfortable lifestyle, and my energy bill is $200.
It's wonderful. So for 5 people, 2 dogs, a good-sized home,
right?
No energy bill whatsoever.
None.
Except the electric bill.
Zero carbon.
It's just wonderful. I really congratulate you for really taking responsibility. The good news is that this spills over. I mean, you are not creating pollution for others by how you're teaching your children, and I just think it's wonderful. And I urge people to explore the passive house idea, the passive house technology. I'm very impressed with German technology, period. And Doug just did tell me that Brussels in Belgium has now decreed that all new construction will be passive house.
That's right.
So, Doug, I just can't thank you enough for coming from Westport, and I hope you continue to do outreach. And I believe that people, if they want to hear more about what you're doing, that you're willing to speak,
Yeah, absolutely.
and willing to be on a website, be willing to go to schools or speak at organizations
Right.
to teach people about passive houses.
Yeah.
So we thank you so much for coming and gracing us with your knowledge and presence and wonderful, wonderful work. And I really respect it very strongly.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's been a great pleasure and lots of fun too. And I urge people to explore passive house technology. It's the way to go.
Yep.
Definitely.
I appreciate it.
For the health of us all.